Alrighty, everybody. Let's get this thing started. Perfect. Cool. Hey everybody, thank you for joining a holly jolly webinar. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Alex Lepore. I'm the Regional Southwest Sales Manager here at Fortress Power. So a few notes before we get started. This presentation will be recorded, so do not feel like you have to feverishly write down questions and things like that. We will be recording this presentation and sending out these slides after the fact for your review. A few things on the agenda for today. So we're going to go through brief company introduction for those of us that are not familiar with Fortress Power. We're then going to dive back into battery sizing and duration, right? Very big topic. How do I size my batteries? What kind of rule of thumb do we use here at Fortress Power to support y'all? The second thing we're talking about is definitely some of these supply challenges that not only Fortress Power has seen, but certainly industry-wide, and talk about moving forward into the new year, what this product availability is going to look like. And then kind of segueing into the final topic here is going to be Fortress Power in 2022 and beyond. So if you guys are not familiar with the GoToWebinar platform, head into the questions tab for any and all questions during the webinar. I'm expecting this to be around probably 35-40 minutes or so, and I'll kind of keep the floor open at the end for 10-15 minutes of Q&A. So hopefully we finish by the top of the hour here. Good morning for all my folks on the West Coast / late morning or so, and good evening for all my folks here on the East Coast. Everybody that's international, good morning / good afternoon, and let's get this thing going. So like I said, we're going through a company introduction today. We'll review the two products that we do have currently here at Fortress Power. We'll go through some new sizing review documentation in that kind of way. We'll go through the supply chain update, and then we'll talk about Fortress Power in the new year. So for those of you guys that are not familiar with who we are and what we do, we're a lithium battery provider focused on residential and commercial applications. So I am personally based in Southern California, just outside of LA in Torrance. We are headquartered, however, just outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in Southampton, PA. So we were founded way back in 2016, and we're owned by a group of investment bankers and solar veterans. You guys will see here, this is home base. This is our headquarters. This is a 30,000 square foot facility, which is where we do a lot of our research and development, sales. It's where our logistics team is based. Now, with that said, we do have two other warehouses, in Texas and Florida, with another one in California. So being a battery provider for the last 4 to 5 years, we've done all sorts of different installations with all of our partners, ranging in the continental US, but also in Canada, the Central Caribbean, South America, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. We are the key lithium battery supplier for SEPTA, which is a local railway company based outside of Philadelphia for my folks on the East Coast. Hydro-Quebec, which is a Canadian utility company using our E-Flex product, and the Navajo Reservation, which is a very large off-grid project based out of the Midwest. So we are continually growing, and kind of my responsibility is to set up a West Coast office here. So for now, we are still just headquartered in Philadelphia, but moving forward into the new year with our rapid growth, we will be setting something up probably out here on the West Coast in 2022. So more on that later. So with that said, let's jump right into the products that we are currently holding. So we have our eVault 18.5 Max. For those of us that have been following Fortress Power for a while, you know that we originally had our eVault Classic product, the legacy product. And what we did was we took all the features that installers wanted from the eVault Classic and stuck it into the eVault Max. So this unit is more scalable than the eVault Classic in that it can scale up to 370 kilowatt hours. That's over 20 batteries in parallel, to where you can put that in there and use that for many of the different applications should they need 20 batteries. The eVault Max, just like the Classic, has this local LCD display, so not only you can read the voltage, current, state of charge, and power of the battery, but also the end user. It's going to help you guys service this battery by reading this LCD display and seeing what is the state of charge of my battery, right? What am I outputting in current at a particular time? And some of those those details that you may not be able to find elsewhere through monitoring systems and things like that. 9 out of 10 times they are available, but this is just super helpful for when you get that phone call, they can read right off the front of this. Just turn this up. For my California folks, this is the largest single unit that's approved for the SGIP incentive, the self-generation incentive program at 17.7 kilowatt hours of AC power. And because of its larger size, it is very easy to install and has a very nice, sleek look, right? That aluminum enclosure, that nice, deep gray looks really good, and aesthetics are becoming more increasingly important, oddly enough, for people when putting a battery in or near their home. There's been a lot of new tests that we've put our eVault Max through, and the most recent one is UL 9540, which is a battery test based on different things. And then also it's testing now for the UL 9540A. UL 9540A is otherwise known as a large-scale fire test, to which they basically try to light the battery on fire. And if it does not light on fire, then you get the old green check mark for 9540A. So you'll see here on the eFlex, we have passed UL 9540A, while the eVault Max is still in testing. Hopefully we'll have that finished up here in the coming weeks or so. So the eVault Max at the moment is certainly our flagship product because of its large size. You wheel it on into site, you make your connections on with the particular inverter that you're going to be using, a 48-volt inverter in this example, and then you're on your way. We also still have our eFlex 5.4, which is the little sibling to our eVault 18.5 Max. So both of these are in total capacity, mind you. So the eVault is 18.5 kilowatt hours of total capacity. The eFlex is 5.4 kilowatt hour capacity total block. So the key difference between the eFlex is that it's our more modular approach on a battery system versus something as large as the eVault Max, which is like the size of a mini fridge. Right, so the eFlex is an outdoor rated unit. So this is an IP65 rated aluminum enclosure. So you can install this outside, just not in direct rain or sun. And this unit is only scalable up to 80 kilowatt hours, but you can install it in many different ways, right? We have a server rack that you can install it into. You can install it on the wall, or you can just have it floor standing. You'll see here on the bottom some different examples. They are rather hard to see, but if I zoom in a little bit, you can see, two of the eFlexes installed with a Solarc here. Looks like 5 eFlexes on the wall with some Solarcs. They're sitting on the floor here with some Outbacks, and then here I think it looks like they have it maybe bracketed to the wall on the floor here on this far right picture. So the eVault obviously is one big unit, it just wheels in. The eFlex, depending on if you have a smaller footprint, or the eVault wouldn't fit, the eFlex is certainly a good option as it's a little bit more scalable and can fit into some of these hard to reach places, basements, garages, outside on the wall, utility rooms, things like that. So it's our more modular approach, and it does have the closed loop communication and is IoT ready. Speak a little bit to closed loop communication in the next slide when we dive into some of our compatible inverters. Now you'll notice here on the eFlex unit, you'll see this ribbing on the top of the eFlex, and if I had an eFlex with me, I could run my handle on it and you could hear the actual ribbing or divots on the top of that. That is an integrated heatsink for 5 times better thermal performance. So for example, our recommended temperature ranges are from 32 degrees Fahrenheit to 113 degrees Fahrenheit. This integrated heatsink is going to help the battery stay in those recommended temperature ranges, whether it be in a cold climate or whether it be in a hot climate. Specifically, as an outdoor rated battery, this heatsink is super, super important to manage temperature, whether it get really hot for my folks here in the South or in Nevada, areas like that, or in the cold climates for my folks in New Hampshire, Vermont, South Dakota, North Dakota, and a lot of those, upper Midwest and Northeast states. I did mention already the 9540 and 9540A listings to which the eFlex has passed. So 9540A is really prevalent here in California, same with 9540. I would expect this to sweep east, just like with most things that do, from how California adopts the code to moving basically over to the east to my home state of Pennsylvania. So be on the mind for that. We want to get these UL listings because we did see more inspectors and municipalities are requiring that, whether it be the large scale fire test or just a complete system testing, which is what the 9540 testing is. So we only have 2 main batteries at the moment, something as large as that mid-size commercial with the eVault Max and something more on the residential modular side with the eFlex. A cool thing with both of these batteries is if you have folks that want to start with a small battery and add on at a later date, you can certainly do that. We just recommend to do that within 1 full year. So for example, Fernando, you and I, thanks again for joining the webinar, Fernando. If you installed an eVault Max, let's say, what's the date today? The 14th of December, 2021, you would want to make sure that by December 14th of 2022, you added on that second battery, or third battery or fourth battery. The reason for this is that when you have one battery that has been used for a year and has been cycled and a new battery, that new battery will actually drop down to what that old battery is at currently to maintain the same charging and discharging profile of that older battery. As they need to align and charge us one full bank, that new battery will drop down. So that's why we recommend to do that within a year. It's going to prolong the health of your battery system, along with making sure that you're getting the most bang for your buck. Two main batteries. And let's take a look at some of the different designing tips and tricks here at Fortress that we have. So first thing to always know is what application are you going to be using with our battery, right? The typical one is backing up your facility. So per NEC code, if you have a solar system and the grid goes out, your solar will stop producing. So people will now get batteries to keep their solar producing in the event of an outage, along with backing up their critical loads in their home. The critical loads could be something as simple as lights, TV, refrigerator, modem, or as something as kind of glamorous as half the home, including all the lights, bathroom lights, outlets, heat pump, well pump, and everything in between. So that's the typical one, is backing up your facility when the grid goes off. Now, there is such a thing as a self-supply in certain areas like Hawaii, for example, where if you install PV, the grid is prohibiting backfeeding or net metering into that because of such large deployment of solar. And if they do allow for net metering, that payback is substantially less than what the battery, from what your cost on the battery would be. So installing a solar system with a battery, you can then get all the excess solar production that your solar array is creating, and then use that battery to then discharge during other times. So most people, what they'll do is they'll charge the battery during the day, and then they'll discharge the battery at night because they obviously cannot send it back to the utility. So they'll use a battery to catch all that extra juice that they're getting from their array, essentially. Now, for my folks here in Southern California and other areas, time of use rate billing is becoming very prevalent. I think my current schedule is 5 to 8 o'clock. I always try and tell my girlfriend, don't run the laundry machine, because what they'll do, everybody, is that from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., they'll have one rate structure. And then from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m., they will pay double or triple the amount during these quote unquote peak times versus off peak times. So for example, San Diego is notorious for, during normal hours, it's a 20 cents a kW for your usage. During peak times, it can go from 20, 40, or even 60 cents a kW of usage. So people will get batteries, charge them during off-peak times, discharge them during peak times for a particular load. It's a more fiscally responsible way to use the battery, but it ultimately does depend on what loads you're offsetting during those times. And seeing if the math will make sense for it to maybe not completely pay off your battery, but certainly get you in the right direction. So we talked about the backup, we talked about the self-supply, we talked about the time of use billing, and then we also have our common off-grid, right? You cannot move off the grid without a battery or some kind of power storage source. Generators and lead acid batteries were very commonplace 5-10 years ago. A lot of that is transitioning now to lithium because of the deeper discharge that you can get with a lithium battery, along with the longevity, right? We have a 10-year warranty here at Fortress. Most other battery providers do, based on their cycle count. So keep that in mind when considering batteries, especially off the grid, as it's really, you don't have a backup. Your backup is the battery, solar, maybe a generator or another power generation source within there. You can also then use them in demand reduction. This is typically used in commercial applications. So this is where, for example, if a commercial building will pay 10 cents a kW, if they are using, let's say, 100 kW in a day, the utility will say, well, if you use 101 kW at one time, we will then step you up into the next billing cycle, which instead of 10 kW, it may be 15 kW. For commercial buildings, this is a big problem because of that, and they end up spending a lot more money. So what you can use a battery to do is manage that demand, keep it underneath that threshold. Let's say in this instance, it was 101 kW, helps them stay below that threshold so that way they're not getting cycled up into that higher billing rate at the end of the day. This is really common in commercial properties, not so much on residential, but for my commercial folks out there, you can certainly use a battery in this format. Usually it does take a little bit of sizing through like Energy Toolbase, kind of talk about that in the next couple of slides or so. So the example I have here moving will include any one of these inverters to be used, let's say in an emergency power application. So you'll see a lot of the common 48-volt inverters on this list that you can choose: Schneider, Outback, Magnum, SMA, Solark, Victron, Morningstar, Midnight. So the first thing I do want to point out is the configuration. Some of these are AC or DC coupled, some are only AC coupled, and some are only DC coupled. AC coupling is when you're retrofitting to an existing system, and DC couple would be essentially a new build to where the solar array will then connect to the hybrid inverter and then connect to our battery. In terms of a multi-mode system, DC coupling is preferred as it's a little bit more efficient, but for everybody out there that has an existing system with another inverter, you can AC couple one of these inverters, let's say a Solark or Schneider, for example, to that existing system and then tie in our battery. It is an extra cost, but I've seen a lot of folks go through with this because they want to use a lithium iron phosphate battery at 48 volts because of all the benefits that come in that. So they will spend a little bit extra to AC couple. Now, you'll see some asterisks next to some of the inverters that we work with, and we've established closed loop communication with these inverters with the double asterisk. So we have Schneider, Solark, and Victron. For those unfamiliar with what closed loop communication is, this is where the battery BMS and the inverter can actually talk with one another, and it'll monitor it via the state of charge of the battery versus the voltage of the battery. It's a more accurate way, for the battery to then give information to the inverter, so that way you can monitor the system and know exactly what the state of charge of your battery is at during any given time. We are establishing, keyword, closed loop communication with these inverters, in which SMA is currently on our list, and we're doing testing with our batteries and the Sunny Island series that they have. So no matter which inverter that you use, we do have compatibility. Some have the closed loop communication, but you can obviously always use these in open communication, open loop communication as well to set up your particular project, right? Not one battery, not one inverter can fulfill all the different kinds of applications out there. So this gives lots of choices depending on what the project scope is calling for, what is the application that they're trying to fulfill, and then you can properly size and design this inverter and then those two batteries that we have here, depending on load profiles, things like that. So jumping into a little bit on the load profile I mentioned, we use an example based on emergency power. So the steps, it's a fairly straightforward process. It is going to require some math. But what you do first is you figure out, okay, you go on site, they figure out we're going to put in a 10 kW array. Then you want to figure out, okay, what loads do you want powered in the event of an outage? What is your quote unquote critical load panel? Here we have some common loads that you would see in the event of an outage, right? We have a refrigerator, we have some, some light bulbs, a sump pump, a well pump. Maybe they want to cook some eggs up on their range when the power's out, heat up a hot pocket, watch some football. So you put all these critical loads into essentially a document. We have this on our sizing tool and figure out how many watt hours a day do all these critical loads take up, right? In this example, they have 18 kilowatt hours a day for all these loads that they want backed up in the event of an outage. What you then can do is select the battery bank size. Here I have an older unit, our LFP10, as a more basic example to which they're putting two of these together at a 90% depth of discharge to give them 18,000 or so, let's say 18,432 watt hours of power. So this is the first step. The first step is figuring out, okay, what's on the critical load and what battery or battery bank size would be able to power all of the load or watt hours per day that they have on their critical load panel. Then you can estimate their average daily PV production to figure out, okay, if I have this size array, I have this size battery. How long will that battery power those critical loads, and how does my solar work into this? So for example, on our sizing tool, we have a really neat option where you can plug in a PV watts report here. PV watts can basically do a full analysis on solar production based on location. And you can see, for example, in June here, they're creating 36,000 or so watt hours per day. After a charge on the battery, they will then have 18,000 watt hours available after the battery is fully charged. So why is this important, right? This is essentially saying that any excess power, this 18,435 number, will either go directly to the AC load, it'll go back to the utility for net metering, or you get more batteries and you fill up this, this extra 18,000 watt hours, excuse me. Now you'll see here in December, this is June, right? Summer month, a lot of sun, the azimuth is higher, so you're getting a lot more sun during noon and things like that. But notice in December when that azimuth drops down, they're producing substantially less energy per day in terms of watt hours, only 20,000 watt hours per day. So you'll see on a full charge of the battery, they only will have around 2,407 watt hours available after they go through a full charge on the battery. So this is important, especially if you're living off the grid. You want to be able to know that, okay, in December, if I'm only producing based on my solar array size of 10 kW, 20,000 watt hours, and I charge the battery, I need to be super careful with how I use my loads during that day after a full charge, because I only have 2 kilowatt hours to play with. So especially with living off the grid, you want to make sure that you're sizing your solar system and you're sizing your battery accordingly, so that way you're not in the red here, and you're kind of up a creek in some instances with that. If you are grid tied, and this is super applicable in the grid tied situation, whether you want a net meter or power more loads in the event of an outage, because doubling your battery here means that you can double or get double the amount of autonomy based on the loads that you have picked out here, the refrigerator, LED, well pumps, and et cetera, et cetera. So you can use this in tandem. This is part of our dealer program. If you're not already a dealer and know about this, sign up to become a dealer, as we can get you access to our sizing tool, which gives you a breakdown on, based on the critical loads, their daily PV production, what is the available power, and ultimately how long will the proposed battery bank back up the loads that we designated in this slide right here. Super helpful. It gives you a really good snapshot on when you're proposing to the customer in terms of, okay, this is how we sized it, this is what your budget is, this is how we designed the system, and this is going to give you, let's say, 4 hours or 6 hours, or in this case, it's 24 hours of autonomy based on those loads. Certainly with more batteries, you get more hours of autonomy, you can back up more loads, so you kind of more you pay, the more you can back up, and it is very crucial to size based on that. So you can expect during the highest average daily power is 30,876 here in June. Their lowest is 20,000. This is the available power of the battery. We sized it, and we found that it would power those loads for 1 full day based on the 20 kilowatt hour battery that we're installing, 2 of those LFP10s. So in a sentence, it's a lot of information I just threw at you guys. In a sentence, what is sizing? You're selecting the loads to be moved from the main panel to the backup panel. Calculate that daily usage from your customer of that backup load panel, otherwise known as the critical load panel. Select a battery bank size to power that daily usage of the backup load panel that you have from that slide 2 slides ago, and then you can estimate the daily available power after the battery is charged, along with how many batteries are going to be there to power those critical loads. Batteries are typically sized for a 2-hour amount of duration, but with more batteries, like I mentioned, you could do a 2-hour, 4-hour, 6-hour, 8-hour amount of duration, or a 2-hour duration for a whole home, but it is ultimately dependent on what solar array size you have, what critical loads that you have in your home or business, and then you can size it like that. Sometimes you can work backwards, especially with AC coupling. You can work backwards from starting with the solar array size and working backwards to a battery bank size. There's a lot of different options. If you do have questions on sizing, you can certainly reach out to us. We can help you out and get you in the right direction or get you access to our sizing tool. So just to repeat it again, You select the loads to be moved from your main panel to backup panel, calculate the usage of that backup load panel, how we did here, how they used it, select the battery bank size to power all those loads in terms of watt hours per day, and then estimate all the daily available power from the solar to the battery, and then from the battery to your critical loads. There's a lot of really good resources that we have, and I'm going to share my screen and show you guys some of the new stuff on our webpage here later in the slideshow. But if you check out our resources webpage and dealer webpage, we have minimum inverter sizing guides. Signing up to be a dealer gets you access to our sizing tool along with a lot of other kind of design guidances and trainings. You can also check out our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel has presentations from yours truly, along with others like John Cromer on sizing, designing, or selling energy storage. And then some other third-party sizing tools I found helpful was Energy Sage and Energy Toolbase. I typically use Energy Toolbase for commercial stuff because they have a really good modeling platform where you can model based upon X demand charges, what battery would fulfill those demand charges, and then really breaks it down very, very detailed for Energy Toolbase. So I do recommend Energy Toolbase, really good tool that I've used. And just some more case study pictures here. You'll see someone hung up the E-flexes here in the bottom left on a rack. They did some E-flexes paralleled on the wall here below the solar. You'll have two of the E-vaults here connected to the outback. And then here you have a Schneider system with a bunch of E-vaults, looks like 8 of them in parallel. Brings me to another good question I get quite often. And Alex, how in the heck do I parallel 20 E-vault maxes together, right? That's a lot of batteries. How would I go about doing this? I always recommend using some kind of DC common bus or a bus bar. As you can see down here, I know it's really small, my apologies, but you'll see here they have this common DC bus. They run all the cables from their battery bank here. They use that combiner. This all then runs up into the Schneider power distribution panel, which then connects to the inverters and charge controllers there. So there are some good brands out there, like the Victron Lynx is a good combiner solution. You also have Reliance, R-E-L-I-A-N-C-E. Reliance makes a very large busing solution. I only recommend using a busing solution, when it's 2 E-vault maxes or higher. Clearly with 1 E-vault max, you just connect it directly to the inverter. But when you get up into, 7, 8, 10, 15, or even 20, having that DC common bus is going to help with cable management. And just like we're looking at here, it's going to make it look very clean, and customer satisfaction will be through the roof, just with not having a bunch of kind of jumbled up cables here and things like that. So a lot of sizing resources I'll bring up here in the next couple of slides. I'll share my screen and walk you guys through the website too. So moving on, wow, supply chain. What a year has it been for our supply chain here? I think this is honestly everywhere where we've seen issues with our supply chain, and Fortress Power, just like any other company, had to deal with some of the repercussions from COVID and some of these other things. And I have this picture up. I was flying home. I was visiting some Fortress Power partners in Hawaii. Was flying home from Hawaii, flying over the LA port, about to land in LAX, and lo and behold, here are all the ships that they've been talking about for months that are stuck in the LA port. So this is it's not something that's, let's say, fake news per se, but this is a true problem. And there are a lot of different things that are helping to work us through this backlog that we're seeing here, which I'll mention here in just a moment. But this is definitely something that affected a lot of us, whether you're on the module manufacturing, battery manufacturing, racking, and everywhere in between. This affected everybody of us equally. So what supply chain I think in 2022 is going to look like is, quite frankly, a lot better. Based on the new infrastructure plan in 2022, you can see I have this article in here on how the Biden administration is going to spend around $4 billion to basically increase the amount of flow in ports. Let's use the LA port as an example, so that way you can move all the existing containers through and be ready for next year's demand, which is projected to be even higher, at least with batteries, than 2021. So I got this report here from the Port of Los Angeles Container Statistics, and you can see, in 2021, they had around 9 million or so, and this is measured in, I think the measurement here was in terms of like containers almost, like container packages. you'll see they have 9 million in 2021 with only 7 million or 7.5 million in 2020. So this is a 22% positive change or upward change from 2020 to 2021. And 2021 is not even over yet. So we absolutely saw, especially post-COVID, more containers coming in, more, just a ton more volume of containers and shipments coming in, at least with the Port of Los Angeles, which really affected the supply chain, which led to lead times of 6 to 8 weeks or even longer for some of the other battery providers out there on the market. I'm really excited to see, I have another link here for you guys too. The Port of Los Angeles updates this daily. So I'm probably going to take a look January 2nd or so, see what that total number for 2021 is, how it compares with 2020, what that percent change looks like. It's a really neat tool to keep you guys up to date with what's really going on at the ports and what are they seeing. One of the things we're doing to keep up with this mass demand in batteries is not only take advantage of what they're doing with the infrastructure plan, which I think will resolve itself. The Biden administration is allocating a lot of funds for that. There's that new 24/7 rule where now they always will have people offloading the containers. But what we're doing on the production side is we opened up a new production line. This is a sneak peek at our OEM partners facility where we've basically opened up a new line to keep up with the demand that we're seeing. So the key thing here for you guys is we're not expecting any production issues moving forward into the new year. I think the shipping situation will end up getting better. I spoke with my colleague, Andrew Parker. Some of you may know him. He's our logistics manager here. And he said, the ports, albeit they're very slow right now, things are getting done. But some ports are better or worse than others, right? We have 4 different warehouses. I mentioned 2 or 3 of them at the beginning of the slideshow, where you have Florida, Texas, California, and PA. He mentioned to me that the Texas warehouse, for example, is just at full capacity, right? They're slowly moving it, but they're at such a low capacity, maybe in terms of workers or truck drivers, that it's just taking such a long time for freight to get in through the Port of Texas. So that's why if you ask different companies, ask them, well, where are you bringing your product in? Are you seeing delays there? Especially with something as expensive as a $10, $15, $20, $30,000 battery, stay abreast with what's going on, depending on which port it's coming in, because that does ultimately affect our lead time as a manufacturer, which affects when you as the installer or you as the homeowner can get this battery installed and stop worrying about it. So pretty cool here. This is, like I said, our new, our new assembly line. I was able to grab this, and you'll see it's state of the art. We only use tier one cells, tier 1 enclosures and everything. So we are looking to maintain our quality with having a new assembly line and production line to keep up with all demand. Bear with me for just a sec. Great. So again, supply chain fixed proposal. Feel welcome. I have some links in here for you guys to read it for yourself. It basically addresses what we've seen, what they're going to do, how they're going to allocate the money from the infrastructure plan, good or bad, to make sure that we don't have this problem again. A lot of what I had heard was this was this had never happened before, and that all these ships, I think the average in the Port of LA was 3 ships at most. Now, it was 60 at one point. I think I read an article earlier this week that it was around like 25 or 20 or so ships. So yes, it is slow, but hopefully in 2022, we are addressing this with the infrastructure plan. Fortress is addressing this with a new production line, and we are leveraging our different warehouses to make sure that we're getting the quickest possible lead time from us to you guys at the end of the day. Pretty cool stuff. I like my statistics for those that know me, so I as you can imagine, I enjoyed diving into these kind of things. So what are we going to do here in 2022? There's a lot of questions. I get that quite often. What's new, right? So we will continue holding our 48-volt residential line, our eVault Max and our eFlex. The main thing is going to be the acquisition of this UL 9540A certificate, this large fire testing certificate, because that is going to be super important. I know in LA County now, they're requiring a lot of the fire departments to now sign off on battery installations and solar installations. So we're going to have this 9540A certificate as it becomes more prevalent. So that way there are no problems with fire departments. You hand them a certificate and they pass that newest, latest, and greatest fire requirement for batteries inside or outside. if it's near the home in that kind of way. The residential line is going to come with some new included features, like our Flex Rack, for example, will be coming with cables in the new year. We're looking to make our eVault Max a little bit easier to install when you get up into those large sizes for 10 to 15 or 20 batteries. But we are going to still be using, the safest lithium-ion chemistry, the prismatic cells, the relay-based battery management system, our aluminum enclosure, a lot of the tier 1 kind of quality materials out there for our products. So the 48-volt residential line is not changing that much. We are integrating with SMA and that closed-loop communication, as mentioned. But what we're really excited about is our new C&I product. So we're going to really look to target some of those, demand charge applications in the commercial space with I call it the Lego block. It's a 125 kW inverter with a 250 kilowatt hour battery that can stack upwards of 2 megawatt hours. Any questions on this, please email myself directly or sales@fortresspower.com, and we can give you guys some more information and get you connected with our commercial sales manager, Kyle, to help you work through some of these projects and maybe even model a project or two through Energy Toolbase. So there's a lot of new things going on in our website at the moment. Let's just bring it up. So the first thing, I wanted to talk about sizing. Let me reshare my screen so you guys can hopefully see that. On our support side, we have now, or dealer side, excuse me, we now have a minimum inverter sizing guidance. So you can find your inverter that you're working with here, and then you can look through here, and depending on the inverter, the appropriate battery and how you would set it up. So for example, we have the Solar 12 kW right here. We're going to use 2 of the E-Flexes in closed loop communication. You'll notice though, we do recommend 3 of them in open loop communication. So make sure that when you're doing your design on a project, or if you're doing your own project, look at our minimum sizing requirements, because it is going to affect our warranty. We want to be able to provide the full 10-year warranty for you guys. So that's the main thing. We did go through our rebranding recently. We're still working out some of the kinks on the website, but another neat thing is this new accessories tab. To get access to the accessories tab, you will need to become a Fortress Power authorized dealer, but as a dealer, you will get access to some of these extra materials that you may need, like firmware update tools, new fuses, communication cables for both the eVault Max and the eFlex. Different BMSs and everything in between. So for my folks that are dealers, go onto this accessories tool. If you do need a CAN tool or a communication cable, you can go right through here. It'll go to my applications team. They package it up nice and neat like Santa Claus, and then they ship it out for you folks. So we do have that new accessories tab. And then the other thing is, if you had been working with us for a while, on the dealer tab, we have like an installation manual section. What we did now is it's all on the product tab. So go to your product. We have the eVault Max here. You can get all kinds of downloads like the test certificates, warranty letters, inverter guides, quick start guides, installation manuals, everything in between. So instead of navigating through a whole bunch of different links, you go to one product tab here. You can find the brochure and data sheet. You can then find all the different downloads that you need. I need the installation manual. I'm done. Whether you're on site, you want to pull it up beforehand and print it out, certainly up to you and how you want to do that. Same thing here with the eFlex and some of our older battery models that we've had. Let's see, what else we got here? Okay, so the next thing here is going to be our newest support ticket system and warranty submittal ticket system. You can certainly call Fortress Power technical support. I do recommend to join us on Discord. It's a great platform where you can talk with others upon designing or troubleshooting your system. But if you create a support ticket system, it will get you in the queue maybe a little bit faster than sitting on hold on the phone. Our application engineers are extremely busy, especially during this time of year. So I found this to be an easier way for you to get a support ticket in there and get your service as soon as possible. So this is just found in our support tab through support tickets. And for those of you guys that are wanting or kind of wondering, how do I submit my warranty? You go right over into support, warranty submittal, put in all the information on the project, and then we get it here. I always like to mention no news is typically good news. So if you do not get an email back, it means that your project is pretty much up to spec with how we recommend it. Again, minimum inverter sizing guide to confirm, how many batteries you want to size up with the different inverters that we work with. Schneider, Outback, Solark, X, Y, and Z. Perfect, 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 perfect. So that's all that's essentially new on the website. We are going to be making some new changes in the new year on our website, so keep that in mind. Maybe I'll share my screen here. So just fortresspower.com, you can find all those different things like install manuals, but don't forget like our YouTube channel and our Discord link and some of these other platforms that we have, which have a lot of training and support therein as well. Last thing here, we are hiring. We are going super, super fast, and we're looking for all sorts of different talent here at Fortress Power. If you are looking to get into renewable energy or try something new, feel welcome to shoot me over an email or shoot over an email to our sales@fortresspower.com email. We are hiring for many different positions as we continue to grow very fast, especially with my relocation. We are looking for that side as well. So we're at 40 minutes or so. So that is all I have for you guys here today. I did see there were some questions that came in. I will address them. This is my email for any and all questions, and this is my direct line for any and all questions as well. So I'm going to pop open the question tab. Hey, Ben, thanks for jumping on here. I'm answering a question from Ben Wadden-Strover. Is the monitoring available for mobile monitoring or only on the LCD display? Ben, it is only on the LCD display for the eVault Max. You can do mobile monitoring through the inverter platform. You know, like Schneider has the gateway, Solark has their remote monitoring platform. So on the eVault Max or the eFlex, for example, it will just be local for the time being. But you can certainly use the inverter to monitor the battery as well, especially if you have it in closed loop communication. You should be able to get all those values. Dean, thanks for jumping on here. Dean Armentrout, are there guidelines for charging a 20 battery bank? How many inverters or charge controllers are needed? Are there wiring and our bus bar guidelines? Is there an app note or manual? Dean, there are guidelines, for a 20 battery bank. It is on a case-by-case basis because it will depend on which inverter that you're using. We recommend to use the minimum inverter sizing guide as a start, depending on what the project or solar array size is, and then you can kind of size the battery based on those different minimum inverter sizing guides. For that, contact me directly, Dean, if you do have a 20 battery bank project, because I can send you over a few things on what we recommend. We do have like a white paper on it to help folks stay in the right direction with those large projects. Ben, good question. If you're simply adding batteries to just solar, does it still have to be in 1 year? No. So if you have solar and no battery, you can add it on whenever. If it's solar and one battery, you need to have the one battery included there. Marcos, we recommend one eVault Max for one Solark 12. Brian Selwa, are we working on a high voltage residential battery? We are definitely considering that. That's definitely where the market's going. More details to come there. Joe, thanks for jumping on here. Thank you, Marcos. Thank you, Ben. Dean, I'll connect with you regarding your minimum battery quantity recommendations based on the inverter max output capability, because that is certainly true, because we will want to figure out what is the pass-through amperage of that battery, for example, of that inverter, for example, and then size the battery and the loads according to that. Dean, I would work on you one-on-one on that just to address that question too. Any other questions, folks? Say we're at 45 minutes. Right on time. Perfect. Questions. Cool. Everybody, thank you again for jumping on the webinar here today. Have a very, very nice and safe holiday if you are traveling for the holiday. And hopefully I hear back from you soon. Thanks.